All right, let's just dive right into this. How exactly does a tiny, $2 million independent movie, one that was almost universally destroyed by critics, suddenly become one of the most polarizing, widely discussed cultural flashpoints of 2026? Well, today in this explainer, we are unpacking the completely wild, chaotic, and honestly unprecedented story of Citizen Vigilante. It's a truly fascinating look at what happens when cinema, modern politics, and the raw power of social media algorithms just violently collide.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the movie behind the madness. Second, the critical panning. Third, banned, boosted, and Musk. Fourth, a fractured audience. And finally, provocative cinema's future. Let's examine this central mystery methodically, from every single angle.
Okay, part one, the movie behind the madness, the objective reality. Before we even touch the controversy, we really need to ground ourselves in the basic objective facts of the film itself.
Right off the bat, a few details immediately jump out. First, the movie was directed by Uwe Boll, and it stars Armie Hammer, which actually marks his most prominent role since his career derailed back in 2021. But look at that original title, The Dark Knight. I kid you not, the director actually tried to use that title until Warner Brothers quickly swooped in with a friendly but very firm cease and desist, forcing a quick pivot to Citizen Vigilante. It was shot over in Zagreb, Croatia, on a micro-budget of just around $2 million, and it had pulled in roughly $600,000 in streaming revenue as of late June. So, financially speaking, it started out pretty deeply in the red. But, what is it actually about?
The plot follows a wealthy American expat named Sanders, played by Hammer, who basically takes the law into his own hands in an unnamed European city. He violently targets unpunished criminals, corrupt judges, and, leaning heavily into contemporary political debates, undocumented migrants. Now, the narrative itself was heavily inspired by a tragic real-life 2016 court case in Hamburg involving a teenage girl and the suspended sentences given to her attackers. But the actual delivery of this story? It is incredibly messy. It relies on a super disjointed, non-linear structure. It's constantly cutting between Sanders committing acts of violence and him recording these direct-to-camera video confessions. It honestly feels more like a documentary stitched together with B-roll than a traditional thriller, and it completely lacks the nuance or intelligence of classic vigilante films like Taxi Driver or Death Wish.
Moving on to part two, the critical panning, a universal rejection. Despite the heavy subject matter, the artistic execution was entirely rejected by mainstream film reviewers. The response wasn't just bad, it was absolutely brutal.
10%. That is the film's critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes. A dismal 10%. In the eyes of mainstream critics, Citizen Vigilante wasn't just a slight misfire, it was framed as a complete and utter artistic failure.
To give you a real sense of just how harsh this panning actually was, listen to this quote from Todd Gilchrist at Variety. He wrote, "The film is so astonishingly bad, it almost feels like the writer, director, producer is deliberately sabotaging his star, Armie Hammer." Wow. And other major outlets like Slate totally echoed this, calling it an incoherent, morally bankrupt slice of exploitation. Critics completely tore apart the amateurish filmmaking, the painfully stretched pacing that padded a super-thin story out to 90 minutes, and a repetitive thumping background score that reviewers literally described as sounding like it was generated by an algorithm rather than an actual composer.
But here is where the story takes a highly unusual turn. It wasn't just the critics tearing this movie apart. According to industry reporting from Puck's Kim Masters, a source close to Armie Hammer claimed that after viewing the final cut, Hammer was reportedly in tears, calling the film hateful, disgusting. Think about how rare that is for a second. You have a lead actor attempting a major career comeback, allegedly distancing himself from his own project in the bluntest terms possible. Normally, a 10% rating and a star abandoning ship means a movie just quietly disappears. But that is definitely not what happened here.
This brings us to part three, banned, boosted, and Musk, the distribution chaos. This is the exact moment where Citizen Vigilante stopped being just a failed indie movie and transformed into a massive global cultural battleground.
If we trace the timeline, the true narrative hinge really happens in June 2026. The German Film Classification Board, the FSK, flat out refused to give the movie an age rating. They cited severe concerns about youth endangerment, the glorification of vigilante justice, and fears of inciting violence. Legally speaking, this meant German cinemas couldn't even show it without risking prosecution. But rather than just accept defeat, director Uwe Boll took this regulatory hurdle and completely reframed it.
He tapped directly into what is known as the Streisand effect. By framing the FSK's youth protection decision as politically motivated systemic censorship,
Boll created an irresistible narrative. He publicly appealed to Elon Musk, claiming the establishment was trying to hide the truth. And it worked perfectly. It stoked the exact kind of anti-establishment outrage that drives incredible engagement online.
240 million. That is the staggering number of followers Elon Musk broadcast this film to. Musk took the bait, leaned into the censorship narrative, and uploaded the entire 90-minute movie to his platform, X, completely for free. He left it up for a highly publicized 48-hour window. This created an intense, artificial scarcity. Suddenly, this wasn't just a bad movie. It was forbidden media that you simply had to see before it was taken down.
And the commercial result of that free broadcast on X was absolutely incredible. Once that 48-hour free window closed, the generated hype vaulted Citizen Vigilante to the absolute top of the global digital purchase charts. It hit #1 on Amazon Prime Video and #2 on Apple TV. The controversy essentially functioned as a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, ultimately leading to the movie securing worldwide distribution deals and eventually a cleared theatrical release in Germany.
Let's look at part 4, a fractured audience. The viewers divide. So what actually happened when the general public finally got their hands on this so-called forbidden film? Well, it functioned as a pure cultural touchstone, and the audience reactions were wildly, deeply fractured along ideological lines.
To impartially explain this source material, we really have to look at the two absolute extremes. On one side, you have the detractors. These regular viewers and critics saw a poorly made, low-budget political rant. They pointed to disjointed editing and argued the film was thinly veiled xenophobic hate propaganda that irresponsibly reduced incredibly complex immigration issues down to crude, violent exploitation. On the completely opposite side, you have the supporters. A vocal contingent of right-wing and far-right internet figures highly praised the movie for being timely and unapologetic. They argued it was a necessary, brave, cautionary tale about failing legal systems and a government ignoring public safety concerns regarding European immigration and crime.
However, it is really worth noting that even viewers who fully supported the film's underlying political messaging frequently admitted that, logically speaking, the movie is a total disjointed mess. Audiences couldn't help but point out some glaring narrative failures. For instance, a highly trained SWAT team is inexplicably defeated by an improvised metal shield. Or a detective in a modern hospital asks for a hand-drawn sketch of a suspect instead of, just checking the CCTV cameras. Furthermore, the film's own protagonist is depicted as an unhinged, unapologetic slumlord, making him incredibly hard to root for. And those video confessions we mentioned earlier, they just end, offering zero true narrative closure. Finally, Part 5. Provocative Cinema's Future, The Aftermath. And this brilliantly illustrates the larger point we need to take away from this explainer today. The legacy of Citizen Vigilante isn't going to be its script, its cinematography, or even Armie Hammer's performance. The legacy is the blueprint it created for the broader film industry, especially since the director is already pushing to release a sequel in 2027. Just look at this highly effective cult marketing playbook that Uwe Boll utilized. Step 1, create explicitly incendiary, outrage-baiting content. Step 2, when regulatory bodies push back, immediately claim systemic political censorship. Step 3, leverage algorithmic outrage on platforms like X to turn your project into a tribal partisan issue. And Step 4, watch as that viral outrage allows you to completely bypass traditional commercial and critical gatekeepers. It's wild, but it worked. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by this quote from one of our sources. A loss for art is a win for cult marketing. The unprecedented global reach of this film had almost zero correlation with its artistic merit. The film succeeded financially and culturally strictly because it functioned as a political flashpoint. It forced people to pick a side, and in doing so, it forced them to watch. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat unsettling thought to chew on. We are clearly entering a new era of media consumption. As algorithm-driven outrage continues to prove it can easily bypass traditional studio gatekeeping and critical consensus, is controversy now officially a more powerful, more lucrative distributor than actual cinematic quality? Let that sink in next time you see a movie trending for all the wrong reasons.